real deal, I'm going to recommend that you leave like a 60-second voicemail, and it's going to be kind of boring to leave, and it's going to be a little antiquated. Like you
Okay.
learn how to truncate your messaging, but I
Yeah.
actually recommend that you do 3 out of the 4 tent poles like on the phone. So here's the information. I know your name. I'm calling you. You made that gift of 1,000 last year. Really appreciated it.
I just really, really like your approach because I've been consuming your content. We met on LinkedIn,
Yep.
and so really, really cool because and by the way, yeah, Kel Haney from Kel Haney Consulting here with us. But yeah, can't
Oh,
thank you
thanks for
enough.
having me,
Yeah,
Trevor.
yeah, really, really exciting because I'm like, and I don't mind swearing just a little bit too. We're
I don't either.
you're talking to folks about just getting on the phone, right?
Hmm.
And you have some phraseology that I want you to uncover for the audience and stuff. But we have a rule too where it's like just pick up the damn phone. And I know you're coaching nonprofits to kind of do the same thing. I'm
Yeah,
not putting
yeah.
words in your mouth, you know what
Sure,
I mean? But
sure.
like
Yeah.
for our team of 22 people, we're like, hey, you can get a lot more accomplished. You can build, a stronger relationship.
Seriously.
You can only do so much with direct mail. I want to get into that because I know
Hmm.
you're dealing with some stuff with Canada right now.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
like I said, it's just like talk to us about just how powerful the phone is and how you started this consulting company and
Hmm.
the what you're putting out in the world because I think it's really impactful for nonprofits and honestly for anyone, even if you're a for-profit, forward-facing like we
Totally.
are.
Your phrase within your team of pick up the damn phone.
Yeah,
Totally agree. Time's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah.
So basically, the way I got started was I was a theater director.
Mm,
So I moved to New York 2 weeks after I graduated from college,
mhm.
and I moved to New York. And I loved being the smallest fish in the biggest pond. I
Yeah.
was had a lot of ambition, was excited to become the biggest fish. And I read a play, and I thought it should win the Pulitzer. I thought it should win the Tony. And I was only supposed to be in New York for 3 months.
Yeah.
But I read this play and I was like, I can't leave. So
Mhm.
I got a job working for the artistic director of Manhattan Theater Club.
Okay.
And it was a kinder, nicer version of The Devil Wears Prada. But I
Okay.
was the second assistant, Anne Hathaway, with like the person who was like
Wow.
the most like powerful person in New York theater. So it was pretty amazing. And that play that I subsequently got to work on was a play called Doubt that they did make into a movie with Meryl Streep.
Wow.
So
Okay. I
it
haven't
was
seen it. Okay.
hyper formative
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
did then like go do all the things that I wanted it to do. But I
Yeah.
needed to do something to make money. So this is
Yeah.
not going to come as a surprise to your audience.
Yeah.
But theater directors, particularly the quote unquote emerging ones, don't make any money. So I
It's
needed to do
art.
something.
Yeah.
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 So I started fundraising over the phone for this theater. I thought I wanted to run that theater someday. So I was calling all the people who saw Doubt or people who hadn't seen Doubt yet, and I wanted them to see it. And I was not shy over the phone of saying that I want to run this theater someday.
Wow.
And it was pretty amazing. I
The
felt,
response was pretty
felt
amazing that you got just with no phone experience. You'd never been a telemarketer
nope.
or anything like you're just very passionate, obviously, and
Yeah.
you bled for the mission, which is kind of what the phraseology that we're
Yeah,
using.
I
Yeah.
mean that's how
Yeah.
I felt. Like times a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, I didn't have a background in marketing. I didn't have a background in sales,
Yeah.
and I raised approximately $6 million in less than 8 years in donations of 2,000 and under, Trevor. So this was like very early
Right.
mid-level donors,
Okay.
and it was because I was talking about my favorite thing. So I have subsequently reverse engineered why I was so successful, why that worked for me. And I've
Mhm.
built that out into my 5 minute fundraising ask framework.
Mhm.
So I can teach anybody, regardless of their comfortability with being on the phone, if they are passionate about an organization or, frankly, even a product, like
Yeah.
how they can have those conversations and how that conversation can unfold over 5 minutes. It's so funny because, like, people all the time say, okay, well, is this stewardship
Mhm.
or is this solicitation? And I'm like, I'm going to blow
Mhm.
your minds and tell you that it's both. That
Mhm.
you can, in the same conversation, be working to call somebody further into community. And guess what? Calling them further into community can include making the gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm so passionate about this conversation. Just from once again, we own a company. We're very passionate about what we do and how we
Yeah.
help. We don't spend a lot of time talking about ourselves or our products. But I've been on the phone for I mean, my first real job was an inbound call center, and
Mm,
my first real job, because I dropped out of college and ran professionally. My first real job, I was 24, and I was taking inbound calls, and I've been on the phone ever since. So
love it.
I, yeah, and honestly, there's like some things like I have never really taken the time necessarily to reverse engineer it like you have, because this is your life,
Yeah.
and how you're teaching nonprofits, and I love it. And let's unpack some of that too, and just the trepidation that people have.
Hmm.
But this trepidation is human. Everyone's got fear about the
Totally.
ask and the phone. And you say something in your content about like taking the ick out of ask. So I want like talk to me about that approach and how you just kind of like break that down for
Yeah.
folks to just get them out of that. I gotta ask, and oh my gosh, you know, I don't
Hmm.
wake up every day wanting to get on the phone and ask people for money. So
So I also like to use the phrase calling in, like that we're
okay,
calling in community. Like that feels
okay,
really important to me. I also really specifically, and like sometimes in marketing materials and in seminars, depending on the audience, I will use the word donor, but I even
totally,
frequently don't use the word donor. I say these are all community members. Like all we're doing is community building.
yes,
So yeah, taking the ick out of the ask is a bit of a catchphrase of
mhm,
mine. It makes
mhm,
people laugh. I think it was just so funny. I was listening to a podcast today that was talking about the origin of the ick. I think I was listening. I don't remember. I think it was Code Switch or something was talking about like the ick and like the ick in terms of dating and things.
mhm,
And so anytime I say taking the ick out of the ask, I watch people smile, I watch them relax. And I think
yeah,
it makes me just the idea that I'm going to acknowledge that this is difficult for most people, that it's uncomfortable for most people. Like people really appreciate that. And here's the thing. Like you said, it's very human to feel frightened. It's very human to feel nervous or apprehensive or to feel turned off by the idea of making an ask. But here's the thing, we all feel vulnerable making an ask, right?
mhm,
So it's like
mhm,
us like opening ourselves up to other people. And this only works when we're willing to quote unquote like show the seams and to be real people and genuine humans. I find that if somebody is like putting up their armor and is trying to like act like they know everything and act like they're super comfortable, and like I don't subscribe to fake it till you make it at
yeah,
all. I think
yeah.
again, super
Well, it's not
ick.
real.
And
It's
it's
not
not
real.
real. And
Yeah, yeah,
people don't relate, like, and especially
yeah,
in our world and how we're marketed to thousands of times a day, each of us, like, we have to be as authentic.
yeah,
And that means being vulnerable. So
yeah,
what I always say is like we all need to gauge like where's your ick about the ask. And so if you could sound great, but if you are feeling icky like about making calls period, about making an ask, about how you're making an ask, that person on the other end is going to pick up on that even if they don't feel icky. So like there's a lot of mindset work that goes into the work that I do with the clients that I train and that I coach of like let's get to your own mindset of like why does this feel icky? We're all just a focus group of one. So frequently people say I hate getting phone calls, but every time I speak I have somebody who's like, I hate phone calls. I only do texts, or I hate text. I only do emails, or I hate emails. Pick up the phone. And the reason people hate phone calls from not for profit organizations is because they are not done well. Like
yeah.
if they talk to someone who was acting, who was just being themselves and being a human and connecting over their shared why of why this organization is important, then people be like, oh, wait, I'm happy to have that conversation with that person. Like they're not quote unquote just calling me for money. Like I have a relationship with them and or I have a relationship with this org and the brand that this org represents in a larger sense. And I trust that whomever's calling from there is going to be somebody I actually am going to enjoy that 5 minute conversation with.
You know, you said something about authenticity. That's a buzz term, but I'm not afraid to
Totally.
use it, right? Like
Me
it is what
neither.
it is. It does it says a lot, because at the same time as I feel like we're over indexed and we're getting marketed to at in an alarming degree. That's
Yeah.
not changing, okay?
Mm-mm.
People like to, you know, put their thumbs down to the world and what's going on right now. I actually think it's one of the greatest times to be alive. I actually think it's the greatest time to be alive. But I just so much opportunity and connectivity and all these great things. And I can have a world class bike helmet delivered to my house tomorrow, like
Yeah.
with my phone, like
Wild.
the things like that, right? Like, but at the same time, I think people can smell BS better than they ever have
Oh,
before.
totally.
And that's why that fake it till you make it thing that you were talking about doesn't work, and you have to be yourself. And so it's interesting, like you said, that you're working on mindset with folks and just
Mm-hmm.
understanding where things come from, like almost like a like exercise in human behavior and it's understand like
Totally.
where, right? Because you just have to be you. And it's
Mhm.
okay, by the way, to be yourself. That's the one thing. People don't just have to give themselves permission to be
Yes.
themselves, right? Like, and
Yes.
that's
Yes.
that's usually enough without trying to sound like
Yeah.
Tony Robbins. Like being you is
No,
enough.
I get it. It was the last takeaway I said when I was talking to the Canadian fundraisers earlier today, because
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, as
Yeah.
we're recording this in December, and there was a strike in Canada.
Pretty wild,
And
huh?
yeah, it's so wild. And I just had so many people reach out that I, at the very last minute, like Friday afternoon, announced that I was going to do a workshop today,
Good.
and had like over 100 people were super game about it. And the last thing that I said was like, my takeaway was like, you being you is enough. And like, I mean, it is, yeah, it really is, but like, we need to be continually reminded of that. And we need to really be like, how do I then like strip off this armor and really like allow myself to be vulnerable in these calls? Because people do, to your point, Trevor, like they do smell it. And I think like Malcolm Gladwell's like blink 3 second, idea of like how quickly we're identifying the person in front of us is
Mm,
super real. So I always am
hmm.
like, the first 15 seconds of that call is actually the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've got like a whole technique that I recommend for
I
that.
love it. I love it.
But yeah, I'm with you. Being ourselves is like what we
Totally.
need to really lead with. And that's the scariest thing, but it's all we got
I
at the
agree
end of the day.
wholeheartedly. You said something very interesting to me. We're trying to kind of create our own vernacular for nonprofits. Like you said, like we're trying to remove the
Yes.
word, we're actively removing the word donor. We're actively
Yeah.
removing the word ask and things
Yeah.
of that nature just because it just works.
Totally. And moving away from the word not for profit to social impact sector. If you ask me, like the whole idea of the not for, I can't, we don't even need to get into that now, but yes,
No.
yes.
Well, hey, Michelle Benson, I don't know if you
Mhm.
consume her content.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome
So rad.
gal. Speaks our language like you, right?
Hmm.
And she said, "Why did we allow on one of our webinars a couple weeks ago? Why do we
Yeah.
allow an accountant to tell us what our industry is?" And
Totally.
I was like, "Whoa!" I had never heard anyone say that. I was like, "Oh my goodness!"
Yeah.
And she's got some zingers, as do you. You said something. I like to chase rabbits. Sorry.
Hmm. I love
You
it.
said something about the first 15 seconds. We
Hmm.
constantly coach and have done workshops in person, online
Yeah.
as well, about your missions marketing message.
Yeah.
First 10 seconds, first 10
Hmm.
words.
Yeah.
My great grandmother said so many wonderful things to me. She said things like, "Show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are." And
Hmm.
she said to me when I was very young, um, "You sell yourself in the first 10 seconds and the first 10 words." And I think in some people call it, like in sales, they call it an elevator pitch and whatnot.
Sure.
Talk to
Sure.
us a little bit about how you speak to nonprofits, how important your missions marketing message, especially with those outbound calls.
Okay, so basically what I say is that the 5 minute fundraising ask is a tent, like that your conversation is a tent. So you've got 4 tent poles that hold up that tent. So you've got
Okay.
4 markers that you're
Yeah.
going to reach in that call. So other than that, you can go off on whatever tributary, chase whatever rabbit you would like, because you know structurally where you're going to head next. So like you could also think about it as a dinner party, right? So like you invite somebody to your house. I'm going to invite you to my house. I'm going to know a little bit about you, using the not for profit example of like, I'm going to know some things about you from the CRM. I'm going to ask some things about you if you're coming to my house for dinner, what your dietary restrictions are, like what your preferences are. And then like, you're going to show up at my door and do you have 2 bottles of wine? Okay, you're expecting one kind of night. Or do you have your phone out and are you telling me that your kid is feeling sick and you're not sure how long you're going to stay? That's a very different type of night, right? But
Totally.
I know
Totally.
that I've got the structure of like, here's the charcuterie I have out for us to start. My husband just made these cocktails. Okay, then we're moving on to the salad. And then I've made you some seafood risotto. And then like, here's like Michael's curated cookie plate at our house. So I know what the arc is going to look like. I know what
Right.
those four,
Right.
four-ish tent poles are going to be. And then
You have
whatever
a
happens
roadmap.
in the middle, but
Yeah.
you got a roadmap. So,
Yeah.
so that's what I do. So I say the first 15 seconds. So really to me, that's about, as opposed to me calling you and I'm like, ring, ring, ring. You say hello.
Oh yeah. Hello.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, oh, hi. Am I speaking with Trevor? And you're like,
Yes. Yeah.
who's this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, hi, Trevor. This is Kel. I'm calling you from organization ABC. How are you doing today? Like you're 8 steps ahead of me already, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I call you and instead I'm like, ring, 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 and I'm like, hi, Trevor, this is Kel calling you from organization XYZ. I'm the executive director. We haven't met yet. Just touching base. Thank you. This time last year, you did a gift of $1,000. We're wrapping up our year-end campaign. We haven't heard from you yet. We'd obviously love to get you more involved, but like first and foremost, like that was your first gift last year. I'd love to hear if you're game to tell me a little bit about what brought you in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. but you know a lot about me. You see that I know a lot about you.
Yeah.
And like I'm setting the tone for the rest of the conversation. So even
Yep.
if that is like the person's like, wait, who are you calling from again? Like then like they're hooked to actually have that conversation as opposed to
Right.
like being ready to hang up. It's like obviously this person is calling me for a specific reason. They like know who I am. They've got gratitude for me. They've got curiosity about me.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
about that first 15 seconds, you're buttoning that with some kind of curious question. I also got in there like, we'd love to get you more involved. I mentioned it was year end. It's not going to be a surprise that this phone call also includes an ask. So
Totally.
there's a lot
Totally.
jam packed in there really
I,
quickly.
I love the roadmap. I love the four temples. I think it's awesome.
Thanks.
It's digestible. It's easy to understand.
Yeah.
What was interesting about what you just said, folks will come to us and they'll go, what do I say? And we'll say, well, you could say thank you.
Yes.
I've already given you
Yeah.
$1,000. I know who you
Yeah.
are. Um, and it's the end of the year. They're probably getting multiple phone calls because
Yeah.
most donors are not owned by one organization. As a matter of fact, we don't own our donors. But if you don't know what to say thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Agreed.
always a great way to start. You know what I mean?
Agreed. Agreed.
Um,
I in my training I say like you start the call with gratitude, you end the call with gratitude, like whether this
mhm.
person gave or not, like they don't owe us anything. And I think that like not-for-profits spend so much time with their noses and spreadsheets that they start to feel like this money is owed to them, as
Oh wow.
opposed to like this is always a gift. This is always a gift. I also have it baked in right before the actual ask in the call that there's gratitude of like, thank you so much for taking this time and like sticking on the phone with me, like before you go into the actual ask. So, like,
Yeah,
it's gratitude is peppered throughout the call and should be peppered throughout the relationship in a larger sense.
I think it's such a massive point. I also think, and tell me the feedback that you get from the clients that you're working with.
Hmm.
I'm a bigger believer in differentiation versus competition
Hmm. Oh,
because
totally.
because I think that leading with thank you is different than what, and I want to hear because you're talking to probably a lot of nonprofits like we are, but the feedback that we're getting is like, oh wow, I didn't think about it that way, or that's not how I've done it before, or
Yeah.
we haven't all gotten the committee and the board and the staff in the same room to work on our
Yeah.
missions marketing message together and things like that. We've
Hmm.
never done that. So I'm just, is that like folks, the feedback that you're getting will go, oh, that's different. I haven't done it that way. And I actually think there's a lot of power in that
Yeah.
because once again, those folks that have given are getting a lot of calls, especially right now.
Yeah. Well, less than you'd think, which is really
Okay.
sad. Less
Okay.
people,
Well, because
less
the outreach is
orgs.
more direct mail, email, stuff
They're
like
like,
that.
I can just send an email. I can send the direct
Mm,
message. Like, it's
yeah.
actually a lot less people are calling. So like, if
Well, that's a good opportunity then.
that's what I'm saying. Like, just
Yeah.
even if you don't know what you're doing yet, at least like pick up the phone and have a conversation. Start there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people are attracted to my messaging and working with me because it feels different to them, which
Hmm.
I think is hysterical because all I know is what I've done for 20
Yeah.
years. And
Yeah.
again, it started for me as a survival job, ended up
Yeah.
as a parallel career. During the pandemic, I decided, wait, I'm happier not doing my favorite thing, which was like pounding the pavement and fighting for a bite of this tiny, crummy little piece of pie that was New York theater, and
Yeah.
was like, I want to make the pie bigger for everyone. Like that was my zone of excellence. And I feel like what I do now is my zone of genius. But it's so funny because this is just what I've been doing for 20 years. So it like still kind of makes me laugh and smile when people are like, think it's so innovative and different.
Yeah.
When I'm like, this is just how I knew how to do it. But I also never had like I never had an internal development job. Like I
Right.
never got up and was in a Devo office at a desk. That has never been my path. So
Right. Right.
that's
I love the story. Like I said, yours is very unique. It's very cool.
things.
Um, but and I have to be careful. I have a strong affinity for the phone.
Hmm.
I have to be careful because I can't play favorites, right? Because we'll have a LinkedIn expert on, an email
Sure.
expert on, some of these people
Sure. Yeah.
um, email marketing. We think there's a lot of power in social. We think there's a lot of
Yeah.
power in video. These are all things that you have to use,
Hmm.
all tools.
Hmm.
But I was thinking about it as I was getting ready to come in the studio to talk to you today. It's like, I mean, of course, face to face. If you get the opportunity to have a cup of coffee with someone or share a conversation in person at an event,
Yeah.
shake their hand. What I mean, look them in the eye. Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh. I think that has to be at the tip of the pyramid, right?
It is.
But
Yeah.
then I gotta say, I just think that just like when we started the conversation this way, just pick up the damn phone. I think it's a
Yeah.
really great way. I don't think I know.
Yeah.
It's a great way to build a relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To foster one, to steward one, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
as well. And like I said, I can't play favorites, but I know you have an affinity for it too. I just think it's so
Yeah.
powerful, you
Yeah,
know?
well, and I think it's also important to know like none of this is siloed. If like what you're trying to do, and I always say that, I mean, the first questions I ask when I'm talking exploratory conversations is I want to know what the relationship is like with the marketing or the comms department
Yeah.
at the organization. Like I want to know what else is going on. So,
Yeah.
because I'll always say if you don't get the person on the phone, leave them like a legit lengthy voicemail.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of power in voicemail.
There is, I can't believe it. And I
Okay.
honestly, if you had told me when I started doing this 20 years ago that we would even be
Yeah.
using phones, I don't know what I
Yeah.
thought. Like when I started, it was before we had iPhones.
Isn't
So
it
like
funny how we just
phones,
come like, yeah, yeah,
it really is. And so like, I mean, I got so psyched whenever that was like last April or whatnot, when my phone just started automatically giving me transcriptions of voicemails. I was like,
very
okay,
cool.
this is great for my life and this is great for my
Yeah.
work as
Good for
well.
business. Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, so
Talk to
voicemails.
me about
If
the power. Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of
okay.
power and underutilized and
Yeah,
underrealized power in
100%.
voicemail.
So,
Talk to
I
me.
mean, real deal. I'm going to recommend that you leave like a 60-second voicemail, and it's going to be kind of boring to leave and it's going to be a little antiquated. 60 to 90 seconds. I mean, sometimes like you get cut off and like you
Okay.
learn how to truncate your messaging, but I
Yeah.
actually recommend that you do 3 out of the 4 tent poles like on the phone. So, what I
Okay.
just did with you of like, here's the information. I know your name. I'm calling you. You made that gift of 1,000 last year. Really appreciated it.
Do you actually say the dollar amount?
Oh yeah,
Like you
yeah.
rip the
So
band-aid off
that's
and the exact
100%.
dollar amount.
A
Yeah.
hundred
Okay.
percent.
Cool. Yep. Cool.
Okay,
Cool.
so
Cool.
like, and people,
I agree.
people
I
get
agree. I
people
just
get
wanted
a
to hear you
little
say it.
saucy about that, but
Yeah.
it's awesome because
Yes.
here's what happens: if I leave you a voicemail, and let's say again, let's use this example of $1,000 gift last year. We haven't heard from you yet this year, and so I'm like, "Hey, Trevor, this is Haney. I'm the executive director, Organization A. You're amazing. Like, thank you so much. You did a gift of $1,000 this time last year. We're wrapping up our year end campaign. We're trying to raise an additional 250,000 by year end. We've got 100 to go, so we're getting there, but we could use your help. I just wanted to shoot for the moon and see if you could do 1,500 this year. You can hop right on our website. The donate button's right there. If you want to give online, you can obviously call me back. I'd love to talk to you, see what you thought about that event we had last year that you came to. And feel free to call me back. I'm also going to put this in a quick email for you, so it's right at the top of your inbox. And if I
Yep.
don't hear from you, I'll probably give you a call next week because I will be making these calls through Christmas Eve. Actually, I'll make them through New Year's Eve, Trevor.
I
I'll talk to you
love it.
soon.
I love it.
So then,
Couple
so
things.
then I'm setting up like you're gonna then
Yeah.
send an email, and
Yeah.
that email is gonna be like you can have a template, but that's
Yeah.
gonna be like more informal, more
Yep.
personalized,
With a link to
shorter,
pay
with a
with a
link to
link to
pay,
donate. Yeah. Yeah.
and you're gonna say at the top of that in the subject, be like, just left you a voicemail.
I was gonna say, what
Um,
do you put in the subject line? Because
like
in the past I've actually just put RE voicemail.
yeah, you could do that. It's fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
it's really personal preference. You play with it and you
Yeah.
see what's working
Yeah.
for you.
What are you recommending? What are you getting in the weeds? What do you recommend folks put in the subject line?
I mean, sometimes we just write like end of the year campaign from in parentheses who that person is. Sometimes we do
Okay.
just write just left you a voicemail. Like I think
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
your like voicemail I think is fine.
Yeah.
And then when you call them back, if you get the voicemail again, you can leave it shorter. But then you can also be like, I'm also gonna like put our email chain. I'm gonna like ping it to the top of your inbox, and then you can
Yeah.
write like a quick line. And because you said in that message we're $100,000 away, you keep that
Yeah.
narrative going. So when I call
Yeah.
you in a week and we're now 75 away, you're then tracking that both in your voicemail and in your email of
I'm
like,
not a
here's
part
how
of a
far we
going
have.
concern if I'm the donor. I'm not a part. I'm a part of something that's winning. Yeah. I got
Yeah.
you.
And also something that's like, and that there's momentum and like
Yeah.
join the momentum that's already existing. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
Love that.
specific numerical amount in both the voicemail and the email, always, every
Yeah.
single time.
Good. Good. I
Yeah.
kind of already knew the answer. I just wanted to hear. I wanted to hear it
Yeah. Sure.
from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, so good. It's so good. You had a like you did mention this debacle with the mail
hmm
um up in Canada, and it was
Yeah.
like, the mother of invention is necessity, right? Or whatever, like, right? It's like
Exactly.
in this case. Now, I understand the market up in Canada somewhat just from some previous business experience like 10 plus years ago,
hmm
15
hmm
years ago. Um what's going on? And obviously you said that you did a workshop today, an impromptu workshop that you just put together
Yeah.
in the last couple of weeks, and there's
Yeah.
100 people, so the appetite's there. It's out of
Yeah.
necessity though. Were
hmm
they relying on these organizations, were they primarily relying on direct mail?
Yeah, a lot were. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot are, and the ones that are
Yeah.
freaking out. And the thing is that a lot of those, which I can only help so much, is
Yeah.
they don't actually have phone numbers. And I think part of that
Okay.
is because like we're sold by all the tech companies like frictionless giving. And so like what we're
Mhm.
sold is like, okay, like all the data of like, well, if you put in that, like, they've got to put in their phone number that they're not going to give.
Sure.
I I would rather have less donors that we actually have the contact information and we can actually build the relationship than that
Yeah.
person who made that one-off $25 gift that all I have is an email. Like
But
and they, or even it's optional for email. I mean,
yeah.
one of my clients for a long time was doing a very well, like nationally recognized fundraiser every year, and then they were putting clips up on YouTube, and then they were collecting donations off of YouTube, and they couldn't get any of the contact information. So
Interesting.
that actually then made those relationships, you couldn't reach those people. But when we did Trevor, when they made gifts on their own or came to see a different show or something,
Yeah.
sometimes people like truly gave the feedback of like, hey, I gave that gift and I never heard from you.
Well, I didn't get
Because like
thank you.
because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
donors aren't clocking like that they didn't give that information, so they're like, I get. And so many people, as you know, are giving these like more grass level gifts
Yeah.
because they are like testing to see what happens. They're not
Totally.
thinking about whether or not, and I'm like, listen, sure, play with it, maybe it's optional as opposed to like necessary for the phone number. Or why don't you just get really radical and just be like, you've got to put it in. I mean, if I buy anything off of online, I have to put in all of my contact information. It automatically
Right.
populates. Like,
Yeah.
try it. I just want like your audience to
Yeah.
be wary that like the tech companies that are selling us these like frictionless platforms, they're not necessarily looking, they're looking at the tree that is this one interaction, this one quote unquote transaction. They're
Yeah.
not looking at like your larger goals, the forest that is like you building a long-term relationship. So
Well, yeah.
just to be aware.
Well, the
Totally.
the head scratcher for me is A, it's bad business, right? To
Yeah.
not collect as much data as possible within reason, of
Yeah, of
course, right?
course.
Like, you're
Hmm.
not stretching the boundaries too far. And, it's like,
Oh yeah.
hey, that's actually what people are used to doing anyway. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? When they like,
They have
even
the
if the
habit. Like, let's like lean into
yes,
habits,
yes. I'll take it a step further and say, I mean, there's, automated texts that you can, send to folks as well if you have an
Totally.
you need all that. You need it all.
Yes.
I guess I don't like to play favorites. I like using everything, but I do understand where
Same.
there's a lot more power in certain vessels, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. But
yeah.
also like being really frank is that like it takes time to
Mhm.
leave to like do a 5-minute phone call, right? And so
Yeah.
like that like time equals money, time equals resources. So that's
Yeah.
also part of the reason why I really specifically focus this for mid-level, because, presumably with your major gifts you are able to make that time to take that person out for a meal or at least out for
Yeah.
coffee, like to like have that concentrated face-to-face time.
Mhm.
With grassroots, I think like our colleagues are doing a superb job right now with like technology and the email segmentation and,
Mhm.
just like making sure the right people are getting the right messaging at the right time. That works great for grassroots, but mid-level needs something else. And that's
Totally.
where I'm like, that's where the sweet spot is of like the phone call with the mid-level. I don't think it's worth it to be chasing grassroots levels with phone calls. I just don't think like it's worth it for the return on investment. Don't get me wrong. If we get somebody on the
Yeah.
phone and we think they
Yeah.
might have the capacity for mid-level, they want to stay and do that grassroots level. That's awesome. And like we talk
Yeah.
to them and, treat them just like we do the mid-level donors, but that's not the strategy. It's
Absolutely.
not going to be cost effective to do that.
I agree wholeheartedly. Um, you have folks create a floor, and usually it's around $1,000 or more,
Yeah.
depending on what there is. Yeah, and then when you say rolling the sleeves up just a little bit, when you say to someone, "I want you to get on the phone," and they're ready to get on the phone, how many
Yeah.
calls are you suggesting folks make a day? Just for instance, just getting in the weeds a little bit.
Well, I mean, I don't really give them a number of calls.
Okay.
I say the
Yep.
amount of
That's true.
time, right?
Yep.
I will frequently have new clients who will say, okay, I made calls for an hour. I talked to 4 people. I'm like, cool, cool, cool. You barely scratched the surface. So glad you did an hour. Like, let's get back to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just have to do the math, right?
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
like you do 12 out, if you do an hour, I'm going to say then you're going to have like, you're going to have an average of 12 calls an hour. So like if you can commit 2 hours, if you can commit, I'm just going to go crazy, and you can commit 2 hours out of your 35-hour work week, you're working
Yeah.
48 weeks. We're talking, I mean, that's wild. That's like 1,152 calls you could be making in a year if you put 2 hours to it. If you do 1 hour, 576. Like it will compound, but like you have to show up and do it.
Yeah, do
So
the
I
work.
make it, I'm
Yeah,
like, what feels in alignment, right? And so what I
yeah.
have my clients do is like, let's actually block off the time in your schedule, like
Mhm.
time block it. And if you need to change it to some other time, because this will be the one thing that falls through the cracks, because you're going
Mhm.
to find every excuse to not end up on the phone. So you have to
Right,
schedule it,
right, right. Totally.
like you're going to the gym or yoga for me.
I had a great conversation with a fundraiser from Atlanta last week,
Mhm.
and she said, I kind of like no, and we were kind of on the same topic.
Yes. Oh, we totally put that. Yeah.
And yeah, I want to get your impression about no, because my thing is just from having a long phone sales background
Mm,
was I didn't really mind it. My mindset
yeah.
was really strong because I expected success and I
Hmm.
smiled through the phone. I haven't really reverse engineered my process and
Yeah.
taken the time because I didn't really think that was that hot stuff, right? I
Hmm.
expected people to say yes.
Hmm.
And with no, I didn't spend too much time on it because I was really okay with losing. It was what it was. My rule became no means no for right now. It doesn't mean no forever.
Hmm.
And our friend Victoria, that was on our webinar last week, she said, no just tells me where I go next. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's a clever and thoughtful way to look at it. I want to hear, for the audience, what, how you coach people up
Hmm.
on no and rejection and whatnot, if you care to. Yeah.
So I like to say that no is a gift.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
No
Same.
is some feedback.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and part of that just goes to the fact that if one of my clients gets a donor on the call and
Yeah.
that donor is irate
Yeah.
about who knows what,
Sure.
okay,
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
just going to use that as an example to start.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, at least that person is then being emotionally vulnerable with us. And so,
Mhm.
as opposed to like trying to avoid that or, really work to de escalate that, I want to like dig into it and be
You're
like,
leaning in.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
super leaning in. And,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
I had a very similar feeling about all this that you did, Trevor, even though I did like think I was the quote unquote queen bee of doing this. I
Yeah.
did take it all very personally. I loved being really successful, but I also wasn't afraid of no because no was feedback.
Yeah.
And so when I hear no, and when I coach my clients, if they hear no, then it's like, first, like, thank them for that. And
Yeah.
then, like, you figure out where you go from there because no can mean a lot of things. No could mean no. And so if you had said to me, if I had given you the ask of like, you're so great, I'm going to shoot for the moon, see if you could do $1,500
Mhm.
this year and a
Mhm.
calendar year, and you just said no,
Mhm.
I would say next, totally hear you. Last year you did 1,000. Could you do the 1,000 you did last year?
You just drop. Yeah.
I
Yep. Yeah.
do if I feel like it's just a blanket no. And
Yeah.
then if I find that, then I drop it again to 500.
Yeah.
And then if the person still says no and be like, totally hear you. And then I might be like, I'm so curious, like, and then again, I would circle back to their relationship with the org and
Mhm.
just like get a sense of like why it's a no, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes then, like, whether they come out and say it's a personal reason or I can
Mhm.
deduct it's a personal reason, then
Mhm.
obviously I back off. Sometimes they come out and they're like, actually, like, yeah, I'll give. And then they just say yes. Or they're
Yeah. Yeah.
like, actually, you know what? I think my dog has to go to the bathroom, or I think my kid is getting sick.
Right.
I
Right.
can't
Right.
talk now. So you don't
Yeah.
know, is the no to the amount that you just
Yes.
asked for? Is the
Bad timing.
no
Yeah. Don't ask.
bad
Yeah.
timing in
Yeah.
the short term, is in what's happening in their house right now in terms
Yeah.
of like, I'm waiting for a doctor's
Yep.
call, going through like marital stuff,
Yeah.
whatever, health stuff,
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like, and I frequently have people tell me that. Like I obviously don't dig for that from people, but like frequently they come out and they share. And sometimes it's something that's either fixable or not, of like, you know what? I only hear from you when you want money. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. That's like good feedback
We
to put
haven't
out
done a
there.
good job saying thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
or
Yeah.
you know what? I know this isn't your fault, but I hear that a lot. Or like, I know this isn't
Yeah.
you, but every
Yeah.
time I get a thank you letter in the mail, my name's spelled wrong.
Mm.
And that's information we get. And I'm gonna be like, and
Yeah.
that this may not be the moment to change their mind, but we can change our behavior on that. So we
Totally.
learn a lot from no. Like I don't come from this like as a traditional background. So I know there's
Right.
a lot of like quote unquote permission based ask stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, I think I do that, but I think I do that in a more intuitive, nuanced way. And
Yeah.
so I say, if it's a no, I'm just teasing out like the no is the end of of a rope, and I'm just
Mhm.
teasing open that rope a little bit to find out like what is that no actually
Right.
about.
Right. Yeah, it just gives you, once again, it just gives you a roadmap. It just
Yeah.
closes the door, opens another one. Where's the
Yeah.
opportunity? It's an opportunity for me to thank them again. It's an opportunity for me to drop and close, so to speak.
Yeah.
Opportunity for me to spend more time with them,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's the
all
greatest
great.
gift that we can really give anyone sitting where we're sitting, making the outbound call or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
totally.
good. Came up with this question like 6, 8 weeks ago. I like
Mhm.
asking guests. I say fundraising is hard. I think that we
Mhm.
all just kind of accept that. It just is what it is. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right?
Yeah,
And doing it very, very well.
absolutely.
Fundraising is hard. Don't make it more difficult by doing what is the question.
Don't make fundraising more difficult by letting your inner critic drive the car.
Yep. Yep. Get out of your own head. Yep.
Just connect with humans.
Yeah.
Lead with humanity. Take out your critic, take out all the icky things that you have ever experienced that someone has asked you or you have asked them, all of your money mindset. Like, take all of that out and get really clear about your why and like share your why. And remember that what you're actually trying to do is build a stronger relationship with this particular community member. So, what I always say is like, if we're doing that and we're really working on this one on one relationship, the money always follows. I genuinely don't even worry about it. If we're truly leading with relationship, the money always follows. Yeah,
We're in the relationship business.
yeah, absolutely.
It's the truth. It's the
Yeah.
truth. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's really,
It's my
really good.
pleasure. It's my
Yeah,
pleasure, Trevor.
I needed to hear this. We needed to have this conversation. It's really, really
Yay.
cool.
Good, good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for the work that you're doing. I think it's really, really important. I'm being dead
Yeah.
serious.
Thank you.
Really cool approach. I'm glad you're doing it, and looking forward to we'll communicate some more. So really,
Sounds
really
good.
good.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Cal.
So glad
Thanks,
to be here,
Cal.
Trevor.
Appreciate you. Happy holidays to you.
You too.